Welcome to my transparent watercolor tutorial, Lively Foliage. This is a narrated step-by-step tutorial recorded at normal speed and is the companion video to my transparent watercolor demonstration video, which is recorded at 3x speed and set to music so you can watch the evolution of the painting. I often begin my paintings by laying in a foundation wash that will become my color roadmap as I develop the painting. And so I'm going to begin laying in this wash, and I'm starting with Cobalt Violet, which is a color that I really like. One of the things I like about it is it has a nice granulation, so as the paint starts to flow down the page, it gets a nice granular effect in the wash. Next, I'm coming in with a mixture of sap green and pyrrole red. It's mostly sap green, but it has just a touch of pyrrole red to take some of the rawness off. And I'm just working that around the page a bit. This next color is Indigo Blue. It's a color which isn't currently on my palette, but it's a color I like to work with from time to time, so I took some out of the tube and put it in another palette and decided to use it for this painting. Now I'm going to introduce a mixture of gamboge and cadmium red light. It gives me a nice orange, and I've introduced a few different colors here. And keep in mind, when the painting is complete, there really needs to be a warm or a cool dominance, and preferably a dominant color. So right now my plan is to take this more towards the warm side and have this orange, gold orange color be my dominant color for my composition. Going to add just a little bit more of this orange tone on the paper, and then I'm going to come in, as I do and often when I'm working with this type of a painting, with this fine mist spray bottle, and I'm going to use it to diffuse the paint across the page and soften the edges. It helps make these tones mingle on the paper and gives an interesting effect that's hard to get with just a brush. My paper's still wet, and I'm picking up some more of this orange tone and coming in with a 1-inch flat brush and just building up this color around the composition. As I work in this method, I'm constantly grabbing a tissue and blotting in different places of paper so that I don't get unwanted runs. Sometimes it's desirable, but other times you get something you're not really after, and so you just need to be aware of where the bead of water is on your paper. And here again, one more time, I'm going to come in with a spray bottle and do a little softening of the paint and help it mix on the paper. One of the things I want to point out, in coming in this manner and doing this kind of foundation wash, it gives you an effect that you really can't get just by taking a brush and painting the area little by little as you work across the composition. I'm not following the lines as much. I'm aware of them, but more aware of the large masses in the composition. So I don't care that I have paint running over one edge or over a leaf or over a vase and it blends. That's what gives some of the nice subtle effects that you get. And here I've got just a scraper that's a plastic card that's from Cheap Joe's, and you could use a credit card or any kind of a plastic edge or scraper. And as this paint is still pretty wet, it's dried a little bit and has kind of a sheen to the surface. This is a good time to do this, and I'm just coming in with a scraper and giving some indication of some long linear shapes and some vining shapes that as I develop my painting, I'm going to work in negative space and make some of these linear shapes stand out more as I do negative painting around them. At this point, my paper is thoroughly dry. I've dried it with a hairdryer, and now I'm ready to begin doing some negative painting. So I'm coming in with a middle value to dark value tone, and I'm going to start working around the exterior edges of some of these leafy shapes. And as I do this, it's going to start to give some dimension to this composition. It's going to start to send some of the background further back. It's going to start to bring some of the leafy shapes forward, and the vase will start to stand out also. You'll see as I do this, I start to follow my color roadmap, as I said, that I set with my foundation wash. I'll start to work darker values of the indigo where my indigo wash is, and I'll start to work some darker violet tones where my cobalt violet is, and orange tones where the orange is. And it's not to say that I won't paint a dark blue over an orange or a green, but in general I kind of follow that color roadmap that I set with my foundation wash. Here I'm going to come in with some of the cobalt violet, and I'm also going to use some mauve when I want to get some darker value in some of this purple area. I'm using a brush loaded with water to soften this and gradate that cobalt violet away from that exterior edge of the leafy shape. And now I'm coming in with some indigo, and again I'm taking the more of an approach of a gradated wash away from the exterior edge of the leaf shape. And some of the other areas are more of a hard shape that I've put in a value. So I use this combination of just darker shapes and then darker areas of gradation, which gradate away from the exterior edge of an object. So I'm putting that gradation into negative space. And here again, I'm taking some darker value paint and just brushing in some dark shapes over top of and behind various other shapes. Now I'm coming in with a darker warm tone on top of some of my orange wash, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm putting in dark valued shapes that indicate where the edge of leaves or vines or linear shapes, and I'm just going to work that across the whole composition as I develop this painting. Here I'm coming in giving the indication of a darker valued leaf shape behind one of these white leaf shapes. So here I'm painting more positively to give the leaf shape, and it's on top of other shapes or behind other shapes. I'm going to do the same here. Just give the indication of a darker leaf shape. It's these simple little brush strokes and actions that as you continue to work and evolve your painting, it becomes a more and more complex composition. It's really a simple process, but as you build this and put layer upon layer, it starts to take on a very complex appearance. One other thing that happens as you develop a painting in this manner, as this evolves, one of the things that you start to see in the composition are lost and found edges. There's lost and found edges all over this composition. So you don't tell the whole story. You don't necessarily put a wash on an exterior edge and complete it along the whole shape of the shape that you're reinforcing. You may just do part of it, and you leave it up to the viewer and their eye to complete the edge of that shape. At this point, what I have are white, light, and middle values. And now I'm going to start to come in with some of my darkest darks. So I've got some of this indigo blue, which gives you a pretty dark value. And I'm going to start working around the composition with this darker tone. This will really start to send some of these shapes forward and send some of this background further in the back and start to bring more dimension to this painting. When you place these dark values in, you really start to get your nice contrast when you put these near your lightest lights or whites. So these are good juxtapositionings to have in an area that you want to be your focal point or your center of interest. Here I'm coming in with a darker purple tone, and I'm placing this paint on the exterior edge of these leafy shapes, and then I'm going to gradate that away from the edge using a spray bottle. Gives that soft diffusion of the color and helps bring that shape forward. Here I'm coming in with some indigo, and I'm going to put that on the exterior edge of these shapes, and I'm coming with a brush loaded with water and gradate that away from the edge. So this is bringing in a wash that's going to help tie some of that area together, and as I've done with the rest of the painting, I'm coming with a spray to soften that edge just a bit. So the painting's still a little bit flat, and I'm going to liven it up coming in with this warm wash of this Gamboge Cad Red mixture, and I'm going to put this in some large areas across the painting, and that's going to give me my warm dominance and help brighten this up a little bit. So I'm just arbitrarily coming in with some brush strokes with a 1-inch flat brush. I've also have a touch of quinacridone coral in this mixture to take it a little bit more towards a burnt sienna tone. One of the beauties of working with transparent watercolor is you can come in towards the end of your painting process with this a nice glaze, and it really can help tie a composition together. And because you're working with transparent watercolor, all your nice brushwork and the variation of values and colors comes through in because of the transparency. And one of the things I'm going to do here is I'm going to soften this wash up a little bit with a fine mist spray. Now that I've dried that glaze, I'm going to come in with some more brushwork, and I've got a middle value tone here, a warm tone, and I'm just giving the suggestion of some more leaf shapes out in this kind of right lower quadrant of the painting to help give a little bit more activity and a little more dimension to that area. And I'm going to apply some of this darker warm tone in some of these other areas of the composition, and doing some more positive and negative painting of shapes. Here I'm doing some negative painting with my darkest warm value yet, and I'm just going to work around the composition, strengthening the areas that I feel need a little bit more. This can seem like a tedious process, but to me it's really not. But it does take some patience because the way I paint in my process is I constantly apply these layers, dry my paper, apply another layer, dry my paper, and I'm constantly evaluating whether or not I've gone dark enough with my values. Do I have dominant shapes? Do I have some movement through my painting? These are some of the things I think about as I'm developing this. And I'm not using a reference photo for this. This would be a good type of painting to use a value study to do up front, so you have your darks and lights planned. But to me, I'm creating art. I'm not trying to copy a photograph. I'm just having fun, playing with shapes, playing with colors, playing with value, and trying to create a pleasant piece of art. I want to point out, however, you can use the same mindset when you're using a photograph for reference. You have the ability to use artistic license to create dominance, to achieve value contrast, to use the colors that you want to harmonize your painting. But this mindset or this process, it works whether you're working from a value study, whether you're working plein air out in the field and you're referencing while you're actually on site, or if you're using a photograph for reference. You can absolutely still use the principles of positive and negative painting, and you have to use good design principles whether you're using a photograph or not, or you're just ad-libbing it and having a little bit of fun creating some art. This may be a little difficult to see on the video, but what I have here is a dampened brush. I have a 1-inch nylon flat brush, and I'm doing some lifting off. So I'm taking this damp brush and I'm going across this tone that I've applied, and I'm lifting off some linear shapes that helps give a little activity to the painting. And what I normally do is I will take this damp brush through a dark value area and draw some of that paint into a lighter area, and gives the continuation of that line. And after I'm done with that, I come back in sometimes and I'll work in negative space around the areas where I've lifted off the linear shapes, and it helps reinforce that shape because it gives a nice darker value and a cleaner edge. Here I'm coming in with some of my final washes to try and pull this composition together. I've got a darker warm tone here that I'm putting on top of this lighter valued warm tone. And you can see that I've achieved a warm dominance as I'd set out at the start of this painting. This gold sienna type color is the dominant tone in this painting. And I can take this wash and put it on the exterior edges of some of these areas where I've lifted off, and it starts to reinforce these linear shapes and make them stand out more. So as I use the moistened brush to lift off, and then I create these linear shapes, it gives me more shapes to paint around. So here you can see I'm working on the exterior edge of an area that I lifted off, and I'm putting this gradated wash on the side, and it strengthens that shape more than what I could do by just lifting off. And I'm doing the same thing here. I'm putting this warm tone on the edge of this area and then gradating that wash. Now, one of the things I like to do when I'm coming towards the end of my painting is I'll come in with a rigger brush loaded with a dark value tone and put some linear shapes in. And as I put these shapes in, I try to give the suggestion that they're going over top of shapes and behind other shapes, and I do that by breaking up that line. I'll take this linear shape and I'll start it on the edge of a leaf, and I'll pick it up on the other edge of the leaf, and it gives a suggestion that it's going behind, and it almost weaves itself through the composition. I was using a warm tone, and now I'm going to come in with a cool tone, a dark valued cool tone, this indigo blue, and I'm going to do the same thing, still with some of these linear shapes, weaving them over top of and behind other shapes. And now I'm working with a very dark value blue to put some very dark accents around the composition. I've been building this layer by layer, and one of the things I like to do towards the end is just put little touches of very dark value around the composition, just to bring some accents in the areas that I feel need it. So I work these accents around the composition and just put little touches of value where I think it could liven the painting up. One thing I would say though is make every brush stroke count. Don't just put strokes of pigment down just to do it. Make sure that when you're putting down a brush stroke that it's accomplishing something. That's my painting, Lively Foliage. I hope you've enjoyed this video and that it inspires you to go out and try some new things in your work. This is the companion video to my demonstration video, which is set to music at 3 times speed, so you can see the total evolution of this process uninterrupted. Thank you for watching.